Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. We always love to bring you the latest and greatest in entertainment, and today we're taking a look at Venom, The Last Dance, the final film in Sony's Venom trilogy. It looks like we're in for a wild ride.
Yeah, this one looks pretty intense.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
The review we've got here really digs into the chaotic world of Eddie Brock and his symbiote buddy, Venom.
Always a good time.
You said it.
Right.
And of course, we've got Tom Hardy back, bringing that signature intensity to both roles. I mean, the guy's a chameleon. He just disappears into these characters.
Absolutely. He really nails that balance between Eddie's vulnerability and Venom's more chaotic energy.
And don't forget, we've got Chiwetel Ejiofor as the antagonist, General Rex Strickland. Always love to see him on screen.
He always brings a certain gravitas to his roles.
Definitely going to be interesting to see how he squares off against Venom.
Yeah, the stakes seem pretty high in this one. They're on the run from the military facing this powerful adversary. It really makes you wonder, can their bond survive this ultimate test, or is this truly their last dance together?
That's the big question, isn't it? And from what I'm gathering in this review, it's not just about the action and the spectacle. It seems like they're really digging into the psychological complexities of this symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, that's what's really fascinating to me. It's not just a superhero flick. It's exploring those classic Venom themes of duality and identity.
You're right. It seems like they're going for a deeper dive this time around. And the review even calls out the cinematography by Fabian Ragnar, saying he uses this really dark, almost noirish aesthetic to build tension and reflect Eddie's internal struggles.
I love when they use visuals to enhance the story.
Me too. I'm picturing those shadowy shots, highlighting the conflict between Eddie and Venom, and maybe even hinting at the darker impulses they both have to grapple with.
Exactly. It's like they're using the visual language of film to mirror the psychological turmoil happening within the characters. And speaking of visuals, I'm particularly intrigued by the fact that Kelly Marcel, who wrote the previous Venom films, is making her directorial debut here.
Oh, that's right. I wonder if her background as a writer will influence how she approaches the visual storytelling in this film.
It's definitely something to consider.
Maybe we'll see a more nuanced exploration of those complex themes she's already established in the previous scripts.
That's a great point. And it makes you think about the challenges of balancing a big-budget action spectacle with those deeper, more introspective elements.
Definitely a tightrope walk.
It'll be interesting to see if she manages to pull it off.
Well, the review seems to think she does, at least to a certain extent. They praise Tom Hardy's performance, saying he perfectly captures both Eddie's vulnerability and Venom's chaotic energy. And they highlight the chemistry between the two, saying it brings a lot of humor and heart to the story, even amidst all the action and darkness.
That chemistry has always been a key ingredient in the Venom films. It's what makes this odd couple pairing so compelling.
It's like watching a buddy cop movie, but with a parasitic alien instead of a partner.
Exactly. It's a dynamic that can provide comic relief while also exploring deeper themes of interdependence and the blurring of boundaries between self and other.
That makes me think about the concept of the shadow self in Jungian psychology. That hidden, darker aspect of our personalities that we often try to repress. In a way, Venom could be seen as a physical manifestation of Eddie's shadow, forcing him to confront those darker impulses he might otherwise keep hidden.
That's a brilliant connection. And it goes back to what we were saying about the film's potential to explore those psychological complexities. The symbiote isn't just a cool visual effect. It's a metaphor for those internal battles we all face.
It may be Venom. The Last Dance pushes that metaphor even further, exploring the idea of integration. Can Eddie and Venom truly coexist, or will one ultimately consume the other? It's a conflict that plays out on both a physical and psychological level.
And that brings us to another interesting element mentioned in the review. The films focus on the themes of sacrifice and the complexities of partnership.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're really digging into the idea of what it means to be connected to another being in such a profound way.
Yeah. What are the limits of that connection? Where does one individual end and the other begin?
That's a big one. Is it even possible to maintain a sense of self when you're literally sharing a body and a mind with another being?
Those are some pretty heavy philosophical questions for a superhero movie to tackle.
I think that's what makes this franchise so interesting. It's not afraid to delve into those darker, more thought-provoking themes.
And from the sounds of it, Venom, The Last Dance, takes those themes to a whole new level.
I'm definitely curious to see how they handle it all.
Me too. But before we get too deep into the weeds, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive into some of the specific plot points and character arcs that are highlighted in this review. Stay tuned, folks. This deep dive is just getting started.
These are some pretty heavy philosophical questions for a superhero movie to tackle.
Right. And it sounds like Venom, The Last Dance, doesn't shy away from those questions. The review mentions this feeling of unease that permeates the film, this sense that the bond between Eddie and Venom is being tested like never before.
Like it's being pushed to its breaking point.
Exactly. It makes me think of that scene in the previous film where Venom briefly takes over Eddie's body during a fight. It's played for laughs, but it also hints at the potential danger of this symbiosis.
Oh, absolutely. That scene definitely had an undercurrent of tension.
Right. Like, even though it's a funny moment, it makes you wonder what could happen if Venom ever fully lost control.
And it ties into that primal fear of losing yourself, of being consumed by something outside of your control.
Like an invasion of the body snatchers.
Exactly. Or even classic literature like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. These stories tap into our deepest anxieties about what it means to be human and the fragility of our own identities.
And Venom, The Last Dance, seems to be playing with those anxieties in a really interesting way. You have these two characters who are both fundamentally flawed, both struggling with their own inner demons.
It's like a recipe for disaster.
In a way, yeah. But it's also a recipe for growth. They're forced to rely on each other for survival, even as they're constantly pushing each other's buttons.
It's a classic push and pull dynamic.
And I'm curious to see how the film handles that dynamic. Will they find a way to achieve some kind of balance, or will they be torn apart by their differences?
Well, the review does mention some pacing issues and underdeveloped subplots, particularly with the new characters.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They specifically call out Dr. Teddy Payne, played by Juno Temple. It sounds like her character has potential, but she's not given enough screen time to really make an impact.
That's too bad. I always enjoy her performances.
Me too. It just goes to show how difficult it can be to juggle a large ensemble cast in a film like this.
You're always going to have some characters who get shortchanged.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to service the main storyline.
And speaking of storylines, the review also hints at the film's attempt to connect to the larger Sony Marvel universe.
Ah, yes. The classic sequel bait.
Always got to leave the door open for more adventures, right?
Exactly. Even if it means sacrificing a truly satisfying ending.
Well, hopefully they find a good balance. Because even with its flaws, the review still gives Venom, The Last Dance, a 7 out of 10.
A solid but uneven conclusion.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that rating. Does it seem fair based on what we've discussed so far?
It's hard to say without seeing the film for myself, but I think it's important to remember that ratings are ultimately subjective. What matters most is whether the film engages with its themes in a thought-provoking way, regardless of whether it perfectly executes every aspect of its narrative.
You know, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
We can get so caught up in the hype or the critical consensus that we forget to form our own opinions.
It's all about the individual experience of watching a film and allowing it to affect you in its own unique way.
And even though this review highlights some potential shortcomings, it still sounds like Venom. The Last Dance has a lot to offer, especially if you're interested in exploring those deeper themes of symbiosis identity and the complexities of relationships.
And let's not forget the visual spectacle. That dark, gritty aesthetic, the dynamic action sequences, Tom Hardy's incredible performance, these are all elements that could make for a truly unforgettable cinematic experience.
You know, it makes me think of other films that explore similar themes, like Upgrade, that sci-fi action flick that delves into the merging of man and technology.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It really makes you question what it means to be in control.
Right. And then there's Parasite, that brilliant South Korean thriller that examines the parasitic nature of human relationships across class divides.
Both of those films, in their own unique ways, touch on that same sense of unease and internal conflict that we're seeing in Venom, The Last Dance.
It's fascinating how these themes continue to resonate with audiences across different genres and time periods.
It speaks to something fundamental about the human experience, right? This struggle with our darker impulses. The fear of losing control, the desire for connection, even if it comes at a cost.
And Venom, The Last Dance, seems to be tapping into those universal anxieties in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
It'll be interesting to see how audiences respond to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But for now, let's shift gears and talk about something a little lighter. Have you seen any good trailers lately? You know, it makes me think of other films that explore similar themes, like Upgrade, that sci-fi action flick that delves into the merging of man and technology.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It really makes you question what it means to be in control.
Right. And then there's Parasite, that brilliant South Korean thriller that examines the parasitic nature of human relationships across class divides.
Both of those films, in their own unique ways, touch on that same sense of unease and internal conflict that we're seeing in Venom, The Last Dance.
It's fascinating how these themes continue to resonate with audiences across different genres and time periods.
It speaks to something fundamental about the human experience, right? This struggle with our darker impulses, the fear of losing control, the desire for connection, even if it comes at a cost.
And Venom. The Last Dance seemed to be tapping into those universal anxieties in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
And that brings us back to that final thought we wanted to leave you with today. The review mentions that the film attempts to grapple with the idea of what it truly means to be a symbiote.
Like it's not just about sharing a body.
Right. It's about sharing a life, a purpose, maybe even a soul. So we ask you, dear listener, what do you think is the ultimate message about the relationship between Eddie and Venom?
Is it about the sacrifices we make for those we care about, even when those sacrifices challenge our very sense of self?
Or is it about finding strength in our differences, embracing the darkness within us as part of a greater whole?
Or maybe it's something else entirely.
We encourage you to dive into Venom, The Last Dance, and grapple with these questions yourselves. Let the film spark your imagination, challenge your assumptions, and maybe even leave you with a few more questions than answers.
And hey, if you're looking for other films that explore similar themes, be sure to check out the ones we mentioned, or do some exploring of your own. There's a whole world of cinema out there waiting to be discovered.
And remember, film is subjective. What resonates with one person might not land the same way with another. The beauty of art is that it allows for multiple interpretations, sparking conversations, and challenging us to see the world from different perspectives.
Well said. And as always, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Venom, The Last Dance? Did the review align with your expectations? What themes or moments stood out to you? Head over to our website or social media channels and share your insights. We love hearing from our fellow deep divers.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the symbiotic world of Eddie Brock and Venom. We'll see you next time for another plunge into the depths of knowledge and entertainment.